Hello, I'm Karin Stein. I am the state organizer in Iowa for Moms Clean Air Force. We're a community of over 1 million moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas, aunts, uncles, united against pollution and committed to fighting for climate safety for the sake of our children and all vulnerable communities. Today, we are marking Indigenous Peoples Day. And I have invited 3 amazing ladies who will talk to us about the concepts of motherhood and caring for our earth from non-Eurocentric perspectives. My own grandparents arrived in South America from Germany in the early 1900s seeking better opportunities. And pondering my own lineage, I realize how disconnected we are from those original people in northern Germany and in southern France, where my family comes from, and how disconnected we are from that old native European knowledge. In the Americas, however, we're fortunate thanks to the incredible survival strength and resilience of many native cultures who have endured against all odds and who are here to share with us ancestral knowledge that long predates the arrival of colonists, including my own ancestors. As a Latin American, I grew up with an awareness that the term motherhood could be defined in many ways. A mother could be your older sister, your next door neighbor. And this is one of the concepts we would like to explore here today. I would like to invite my guests to introduce themselves. We'll start with Mary Lyons. Mary, would you tell us your name or names, the language or languages you speak, the nation of your ancestors, and tell us about your children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren.
I'm saying hello, my name is Second Water Woman. I am Ojibwe First Nations. I live in the center of Turtle Island, as the Anishinaabe described this landmass. The residency and where all the bills are sent to me is in the state of Minnesota, we always say. So I want to say that with much great humor, as because we are humorous within nature. I am a great grandmother. I also sit on many councils that has been bestowed onto me in a very honorable way. The generations and the lineages of holding the 7 generations, I sit in the center as I have been witnessed and been in the presence of my mother, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother. And now I sit with my daughter, my granddaughter, and my great-granddaughter. So that is our description of the 7 generations for us being the Meday Top Hat Society. So I'm very honored to be here. I really don't identify the colonist arenas, as they say it state for state or the United States of America. This is a landmass, and I live up by the invisible line. So it's an honor to be here with you ladies.
Thank you, Mary. Stephanie?
I just introduced myself in my traditional language, which is Meskwaki. My name means goes beyond, and I'm from the Swan clan. I live right in the very middle of Iowa, which is the chosen place that Meskwakis decided to inhabit about, getting close, I guess, now to 200 years ago. I am also an enrolled member of the Ho-Chunk Nation, and I am Omaha and Lakota as well.
You have children, right?
I do. I have 2 children that are both teenagers now.
That's an adventure. Shaina, over to you.
Hi, my name is Shaina Oliver. I am originally born on the Navajo Reservation in Shiprock, New Mexico. I currently live in Denver, Colorado. I am a tribal affiliate of the Navajo Nation, also known as the Diné people. I am a mother of 4 children, and I consider us the descendants of the genocide known to the people as the Indian Removal Act, and known to the Navajo people that as the Long Walk of the Navajo. And I would like to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day with Mom's Clean Air Force today. And I am a mother that deeply cares for all the children that are currently facing these hardships that we are in today. And fighting for these children's future is everything to me as a mother, for my own children, as well as the children of the land. And as an Indigenous mother, it's important to me to care for the land, as well as my children and all the children that are born on Mother Earth. And to me, Mother Earth has always been a cultural thing to acknowledge through our ceremonies, through our sweat lodges, as well as the Native American church. Everything involves Mother Earth, as well as the intaking of the needs that we have, that we honor the air that we breathe, as well as honoring the water that we intake, and that Mother Earth nurtures us. And celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day incorporates acknowledging all forms of life, and not just the human life, but as well as the mother life that nurtures us as living beings.
Wonderful introductions. Thank you. I would like to start with my first question, and that is, what is the word, or are the words, for mother in the languages you speak, including English? Stephanie.
So let's see, I speak 4 languages and have taught my kids those 4 languages to different degrees. We used to read a book in French together, and so mère is one word. Madre, or mama, in Spanish, and of course mom in English, and nek, my mother, in Meskwaki.
Mary.
Mine is Mima, Kukan, Nushkalmas, and we just we kind of, I mean, those are the given words, but within the Ojibwe First Nations, so referring to the hierarchy, is we acknowledge through energy, you know, like if they come in the door, we sit still. We don't have that colonial pathway of saying, you know, Buju, Mishkomas, or Kukam, or whatever it is. We acknowledge mostly with facial expressions, but just the feminine hierarchy when they come in could be just about anybody. You know, it could be an aunt, or it could be a friend of an aunt, or anything. But the description, as I know what you're asking, is mother. Those, as you obviously, I'm very old. I always like to see them the mature. Well, I have been through the Removal Act, the boarding schools, all the way up until what the day is. And myself, my father born in 1889. His mother gave birth to him when she was 52, and his grandmother was born in the late 1700s. So I have this. I have a very limited massive introduction to the colony world because of that. I don't have those groupings of expectations other than having a respectful gesture. I guess that's what I'm saying. And this is what we teach my children. You know, whatever was taught to me is taught to them. And I think part of the languages that we want to say who we are is we say we're Anishinaabe, which means people of the land. There's many identifications of who we are as the Ojibwe nations. We have many different branches. and within those branches comes different dialects. So within those dialects, it's, we speak them when we're within that arena of people or that particular land, because of those broken dialects and expectations. And
So
I think
lots of different terms, and that in itself
so.
is that in itself is very enriching. Just the fact that you have so many languages to go to expands your definitions of self and other in so many different ways. Shaina.
In the English language, I go back to mom as a reference for mother. And in the Diné language, it is Shema in our language. And for like grandmother, it's like Shifma Sana. And there's actually, in the language of the Navajo as well as other tribes, our languages used to be separated by female and male in the way you would communicate with each other. So you would know if it was a woman speaking, the way she would speak. And as well as for men, you would know that they are a male by the way they spoke the language. So in some languages it's like that. I know in Spanish it's like Latina and Latino are like, it differentiates the sex. So same thing with our tribes. Our languages once did that. They once separated from women and men. Were like separate languages, but the same.
That's really interesting. In your cultural tradition, whom do you call mother? Can it be more than one person?
Oh gosh, a mother can even be a man. Like as I was speaking before, to identify the motherly concept is how we were always taught is that the one who carries the canal that brought you here, meaning we believe we come from the stars, we enter a mother's womb, and we experience those elements, water, and then air, and then fire, the warmth, and then meeting earth. So that would be that traditional value for us, and gearing towards, because we so live multi-generational and always have been multi-generational, the final voice never went to that particular woman who birthed us. It went to the one who birthed her. The grandmothers of the great grandmothers always seemed to, they had the final word, you know, and so that's just the way it was within in our world, and continues to be.
Tell us a little bit more about a man could be called mom.
Well, they don't really are called mom, but they refer to them as in the same responsibilities. They take that hierarchy and that responsibility. Okay, I'll say for instance, my mother passed away when I was young. And so we had all the aunties and the grandmothers and all her sisters and the stuff. We all had extended mothers, all extended female. But ultimately where it came down to, even that last say-so and the stuff came from my father, because he held her corner of the world of respect, because he knew her more than anybody else. And he wanted to make sure that her traits rested in me.
Beautiful. Stephanie, so who can be called mom or mother? Can it be more than one person?
It can definitely be more than one person in Meskwaki culture, and also Ho-Chunk culture as well. It's almost identical. And our kinship system among the Omaha is almost identical as well. You have your mother who gave birth to you, and if she has sisters, then those women are also your mothers. Beyond that, then that it obviously will create a kinship system that expands to a lot of different people. And it is not just a nuclear family in that sense then. And you can end up with say a mom that is far younger than you are, depending on how you're related through our traditional kinship system. I have two sisters. One of them has 7 children, and of those, there are 3 grandchildren, and so therefore I'm a grandmother already through my sister. Let's see, and then obviously so in Meskwaki culture, the parent-child relationship is extremely important. In the ideal situation, you would have your mother and your father, and your relationship to them would be pure love. Your parents would not be the disciplinarians. Their brothers and sisters would actually be the people who would discipline you. And you have a loving relationship with your grandparents as well. And they act as caregivers, teachers. They're your guidance through life. And then you have also sort of a hierarchical system when it comes to siblings. I happen to be the oldest sibling among my mother's children, and so therefore I have somewhat of a mothering role. I would be able to tell my brothers and sisters kind of what to do or how to behave, and if they've done something wrong, I can call them out on it. So I'm part of the disciplinary system in that way, but our aunts and uncles are the strictest when it comes to that. I think that's about it. They can go on and on, but yeah, we have our extended family is not extended to us. We're very close.
That's great. Shaina, tell us about the definition of mother. Who can be a mom in your culture?
I think culturally, we accept a lot of women in our community as our mother, and we allow them to take that place sometimes, to be the mother carer for the community when there's a mother missing, or when there's a mother absent from the community or the family. So in a sense, yes, we do incorporate mother as the image of the women in our surroundings. And I think with Indigenous communities, it has always been common that way for children to have like a second mother image in their life, which is either their aunt, their sisters, their grandmothers. So those are usually the people that are secondary mother images in the community. And for me, it's been my grandmother who has been my secondary mother image, who has really been there and supportive, always been supportive as an Indigenous mother and being there. But I also remember there's a lot of men influences in my life. I know when I was ever upset or hurt about something or crying, even as a little baby, I still remember to this day that being picked up and perched on my grandfather's lap or my great-grandfather's lap as they sang either Navajo song from my great-grandfather to my grandfather, who would sing peyote songs while I sat on his lap.
Wonderful, ladies. Thank you so much. Let's get a little more personal. What was it like for each of you when you first welcomed your first child? And it doesn't have to be a biological child, just the first child in your life. What was that like? And how did that change you? Shaina, let's go with you first.
I think motherhood has really changed me. I am a young mother, and I think it really changes you when you have your own child, and it really takes you to a spiritual level as a creator of life, as well as the responsibility of not only for your children but their children in the future. Like, it's really important for me as a mother to be there for my children, so that we don't continue this generational trauma that we all are inflicted with in the Native community.
Yes.
And one of the things is we really hold strong in motherhood and trying to teach. And I think with motherhood, with children, it's a sacred, very sacred thing, and you don't realize that until you have those children in your life, and that you see the sacredness of life and the sacredness of the things that they'll need, of
Yeah.
sustainability.
Yeah. So along that same line, what was it like when you first welcomed a child into your life? What did you feel? What went through your mind?
I think I felt an unbelievable warmth of love for the child, and I think having that source of energy is really sacred when you have your children, as well as when you realize the sacredness of all children that you come across, and how much you influence children is a really a sacred thing, because you never know what you'll influence in children around you, and how much people really look up to the adults in our community. And children are always there to learn, and they're curious, and I think that's what makes human life just a wonderful circle that we can learn from when we have our own children. And we tend to want to bridge that life that has been missing these generations, especially with the Indigenous community, trying to re-bridge those lost cultural ties. And now we're reincorporating the knowledge of sacredness in our air that we breathe, as well as the water we drink and the lands that we walk. And I think that's really an amazing journey to have as a mother, is when you bring in life, and when you realize that it's not just about your children, it's about the children after them.
Mary, do you want to speak to that?
Oh my goodness, I could go on for days on that one. Mother just isn't a word, it's a responsibility. And that responsibility comes with probably one of the highest guidance of honor and respect, because you pretty much keep your lineage line in track and in sight. And the only way I can tell when I talk to children sometimes about this is we always go into different stories for them to understand what a responsibility is, and why a child won't come up and say mom, but or even a friend or an older person, it could even be a grandparent, because you may have some guidance they need, and they may look at you for that. And I'll give you an example what I mean, because I'm just kind of talking off here. You know, in our traditions and this stuff and that, there within our regalia, we wear drops. And within the drops there, well, when we were younger and my mother was, we didn't call it regalia. That was just part of our clothing and that there. And ours was made of deer hide. And on those drops in there, they were cut. And if you had 4 responsibilities, in those 4 responsibilities of those drops would be 4, and they would be knotting. The knots would be different. So if danger came and the ones you are to be looking out for, they would know it too. They would come running to you. And without using words, they would grab on. So if you were in the pitch dark and without nobody talking, you could go back and feel your drop and you could find out who wasn't with you. And so you could call out, and somebody else, if they had them, they could call back that same sound. So then you would move. You see, in our traditions, and I understand the questions that you're asking, is we don't come from that colonial makeup. We come from a responsibility of appreciation of life, you know, because we come here as students, and we are to be the original caretakers of Earth. We have no ownerships other than being a responsible student. So that's part of it. So it's really hard when some people ask a specific question, and I know they're seeking an answer, but within truth and unveiling our hidden history, we have to speak our truth, and we have to speak our truth not within a colonial context. We have to speak within our energy and our spirit and of our heart of who we were as people. So being a mother to somebody is part of your responsibility is when you enter this world. Does that make sense?
It does. And what I love, Mary, is as I was formulating these questions, I was thinking to myself, I'm limited by my own worldview as I even conceptualize these questions. And I was hoping that you would all push me beyond even the limitations of my own questions. And so I'm loving what you're saying, and I think I do understand. Let me push a little bit though on how has it changed you? And I'm going to use an example myself. When I was a really little girl, I grew up in the eastern savannas of Colombia. My dad was a farmer, and I didn't have any electricity until I was 12 years old. And so we basically went with the rhythm of the day, got up before dawn, and basically got tired at 6:30 when it got dark, and we had candlelight. And I was homeschooled. And so as part of my childhood, my framework was nature. That is what dictated how I felt and who I was. Later, when I moved to a city, that was diluted a little bit. But long before I became a biological mother, and I remember very clearly when my first daughter was born, I felt like I'd always known her. I felt completely comfortable handling her and all that. So you could take the question literally, but in the broader sense, which is what you're pushing for, I remember as a child, as a small child, feeling the sun on my skin, feeling the mud between my toes, and feeling in my heart that what I was in touch with was something I was responsible for before I had fully formulated the sense of responsibility, but I felt I needed to be careful. Can you pinpoint a moment in your life when you felt there was a conscious change in you that somehow was tied with any role relating to motherhood?
Ooh. Mine is a little bit more difficult because the way I was brought up, you know, I tell you, I was in a sense of, see, my father being First Nations Ojibwe and my mother being stateside Ojibwe, but yet her lineage line comes, we never had that separation from Canada to the United States. And we always had our contacts even from the East Coast of where we originated from, and the mass contacts of how the Ojibwe kind of spread out, right?
Mhm.
So we always had uncles and aunts and this and that there. But, you know, the question always comes back to is that particular word mother and that responsibility differs from who I am as being First Nations and Anishinaabe Made, is when they removed me from my family. And that was my first awakening of probably one of the worst colonized events in my life.
I can't begin to imagine. It's
So
yeah.
it's so I enjoy in a way talking about it because unveiling our hidden history. If they knew these in the context, because see, we're the original people of this land, and yet we stand the most invisible, and yet the expectations of what is imposed or even requested of us is a nature we'll never be in. We will always be able to see that world, but we'll never be able to stand in it. They may pull us in for a reason, but yet they will put us back 10 times quicker. And what I mean by that is that the essence of who we are when we were entered into this world is that we know water carries memory. So when our spirit entered our mother's womb, we automatically got downloaded with every ancestor before us. See, we say they're in us and they're all around us. And so what during that removal time for me is I knew the harm was coming to my body and not my spirit, because I cried out to my grandmothers and they took my spirit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So these are very delicate questions of the past, but if to understand is you cannot make something or someone be a mere image of you because it was never meant to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, these questions here is, to me, if we go back into that motherly context and this stuff, that is just part of our obligation and responsibility, because that's a part of life. That's a part of caring. That's a part of love. That's part of the oneness. That's part of our obligations as students of being here. That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mary. Stephanie, so answer any way you wish, push the limitations of my question. But what was it like when you welcomed your first biological or non-biological child into your life, and expand upon that? How did that change you? Just expand upon that moment, however you want to describe or identify that moment.
I think that, so my first child, but through my sister again, was her oldest daughter. And I remember she was first born, and she brought her to my house to let me meet her for the first time. And although she didn't come from my body directly, I felt such a strong connection to her, and I was able to help take care of them a little bit here and there, their first couple of years for the oldest and the second oldest. And so had a pretty good bond with them. And I was struck by, so I talked about our traditional way of bringing children up in our culture, and that would make me the disciplinarian, but I could never really do that. So I had so much love for them as if they were my daughters that I really didn't do a lot of discipline with them. A little bit, but not like the old days when it used to be really, really strict. And then when I had my daughter, the oldest of my two biological children, I think I really identified with what you said, Karin, about that sense of knowing her already. I feel like I had that as well, because number one, I already knew that I was going to have a daughter. I knew it was going to be a girl, and when I was expecting my son, I knew it was going to be a boy. So, and the thing with my experience is that I wasn't raised by my biological mother, and I had very little contact with her sisters. And that was due to a lot of factors, such as alcoholism and drug abuse and abandonment and things like that. And so I didn't have the typical mother figure in my life. I had two women who were, now that they're both gone, I realize were my mothers, were kind of the stand-ins for a biological mother. And that was my great grandmother, Sophie, and her daughter, Irene, who was my grandfather's sister. And those are the people I learned the most from, about who I am as a Meskwaki woman, what my responsibilities are as a culture bearer. And so now that ties in with what Mary said about our responsibilities as women and as mothers, because there is not only a responsibility to your own children, you have lots of right, we have this extended family and this kinship system that will likely make you the niece of someone else, and so therefore they should be the ones telling. But if they're younger than you are, then you still have a responsibility to sort of expect good behavior out of them and to be safe and things like that. And so once you become a mother, you have a little bit more of a right, I guess, I don't know if that's really the right word, but you then have a responsibility to your whole community to look out for each other and look out for other kids, whether they're your kids or not, whether they're your aunts and uncles, even though they're younger than you are. You still have that responsibility to speak up for them, to them. And I think on a greater scale, in terms of being the ones who are charged with passing on culture to the children, then therefore you have responsibility tied directly to the earth, because you are, in our way, obviously, it's there's a sense of stewardship rather than dominion over the earth. And so you're bringing these children into that awareness, into that understanding of our relationship with the earth. So that's directly related to our culture is built around that. So so that's where the greater responsibility comes in.
Okay, well, that was actually a great segue into the next point I would like you to address, which is, what are your biggest worries and hopes for the world that your, mine, everybody's children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren will inherit? And I will start with Mary.
The imprint within me is an obligation to that original agreement, as I would come here as a student, walk as a student, leave as a student. And one of the things we learn is that our spirit was in our mother's womb for up to 9 months while she built this beautiful blanket around us. And then when we entered the world, we took that first breath air. And then we felt the warmth of fire. And then we nourished and we resided on earth. You see, those are 4 elements. And within those 4 elements, they show no prejudice. Womankind did that. And they did it for such unthinkable reasons. And what has happened now is when you hide such a lie through theft, you're going to mislead many feet into a world of chaos, such we're facing today. And I say this with people probably wouldn't understand this, but I say this with a sternness out of love. Because if they knew the truth, the historical truth, and owning what had happened to them, and if they cleaned their filters out and let things go, we could probably, we would be in a better world. Because what they did, and with the Indigenous peoples of all the around, and I mean Indigenous people doesn't necessarily have to look like myself of being brown of this land. Indigenous peoples could be of the Netherlands. And I was blessed to travel all over the world in that there, because I heard from the elders and the wisdom keepers, the same knowledge as we carry is because we protect these 4 elements. And water carries memory. And today that memory is being stripped. And it's being stripped through, oh, well, we're going to send it through purifications. We're going to do all of this and that there. You can take waters from the springs and that there and grow life. Mm-hmm. But you can't grow life from the water that comes out of your faucet. You may nurture life. So that's very important, is when I say there is hidden truths to it. And if you do not tell the children, and if they continue to live in this abundance of deceit, they're going to face more chaos. And that's why I'm glad I like this segment of being motherly, because it's a responsibility. And being motherly also is a responsibility of a male. Male and females carry such a spiritual energy. And if you do not respect those 4 elements, you're not going to respect what could be. And I say that even with the fires and stuff, you have to really realize the power of these 4 elements. People say we're destroying the earth. No, we're not destroying the earth. We're destroying ourselves. How arrogant for us to think we are destroying her. We may be giving her a little scratch, but she's going to come back pretty tough. And she's going to remind us that I gave you the waters of life. I gave you the air to breathe life. And I gave you the fires to sustain those while you're in my residence.
Yes, yes.
And if these young people, I know my young people, I do not speak unless my great-granddaughter understands what I'm saying. Otherwise, like my father would always say, if you're rambling, shut up. Because you do not have the gift of the gift of arrogance wasn't given to you. That came from a tongue of a different land. And when I say that is that when we speak, especially on Indigenous Peoples Day, they need to know the truth. We cannot keep going on saying we are bruised individuals and this is what you did to us. No, that's what happened to them, and they brought the same traits to our territories to continue to live that abuse, what happened to them. You cannot come along and be a thief without the repercussions, not of somebody else's hand, but the hands of your ancestors that live inside you. And so when I say this, and when we talk about what's happening with climate change, there's many arenas that is missing, because we seem to think human. You know, like the fires in California, they're worried about their homes and that. They're, oh gosh, this old lady's worried about the animals. I am so worried about the plant life. I'm so worried about everything that sustains us humans. We can build another house. We just cannot put the animals back in the forest and the birds and that in there if we keep depleting part of who we are as a oneness.
Yes.
You know, we have to realize that that breath, when we're what's happening in COVID today, they're so worried about if you sneeze and you cover up, you're going to get that germ.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want you to think about this. What happens in the Amazon is that way up in Canada, towards the North Pole, is going to feel that because that air is going to travel.
Absolutely.
So when you keep the simplicity of those four elements and you think about it that way, you're going to start understanding that life is a gift. You cannot abuse it.
Absolutely. And the world will go on without us. You're absolutely right. Shaina, let me turn to you. What are your biggest worries and hopes for the world that our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren will inherit?
I worry that for their sustainability, I worry that whether the air will be safe for them to breathe, and will the water ever be clean again, and will they be able to walk safely on these lands once more. And my hope is, I have a lot of hope because I'm really amazed at the younger generation that have stepped up and in leadership. And the love that they show is such an amazing spirit to come across. We have a few wonderful Indigenous leaders here in our community, as well as across the United States. I've seen so many amazing young youth speaking up about their future and for the next 7 generations. So that gives me a lot of hope for our younger generation. And I hope that fire in their spirit doesn't die and we continue this this hoop of life, and by celebrating Indigenous peoples today. And we've come a long ways before we can actually acknowledge Indigenous Peoples Day. And I wish for the children to be able to play and breathe safely in their communities from all the harmful air toxics, and to be able to drink that water and nourish their bodies without contaminating, coming in contaminants. So I think it's really important that we support the youth that are speaking up. And as mothers, that's as a mother, that's really important to me, is supporting these youth to be amazing leaders.
Thank you, Shaina. Stephanie, what are your thoughts?
Well, one big worry I think that is nearly ubiquitous when it comes to Indigenous peoples is the lack of interest maybe for their traditional cultures and language. I feel like when we talk about what all of that means, it's again a holistic kind of view on that, which is if you don't understand where you come from, who you come from, you don't understand your history and your culture and your language, and therefore you don't really have a full understanding of who you really are and what your place is in the world and on this earth. So I think that I can speak to what happens in my household. I have been raising my kids with things like understanding food sovereignty. I take them out every year in different seasons to gather medicines or food And we do that every year. Ever since they were born, we've done that. And I think in comparison to other Native kids that they maybe attend school with, they have a better understanding of those things, and they can identify certain plants, or they can identify trees at different stages. You know, when they're first budding, they know what they are. They know what trees to look for different things, and so. But at the same time, I see them diving into a laptop, a screen of some sort. So a phone, a laptop. And so that's very distracting to what life really, really is. And so that is one of my biggest concerns, is to have this disconnect between yourself and the real place you live. So all of that comes into play. So, I mean, if you're just looking at a screen, then you can't have a full understanding yet of all of those things that I mentioned.
You know, I'm just going to interject and say something personal about your kids. You know, I adore your kids, and I have said to them, if you ever get tired of your mom, just come here. Spend time with John and me. And I want to say that because I hear your concern. It's real, and it probably happens to most of us, Indigenous or not, who care about having kids connect to the reality around them. But I see in your children a lot of hope, Stephanie. They are awake. So you're doing something, and maybe it's just that the things you were referring to earlier. What are your personal hope? What is it in Tenoch and Sophie that gives you hope at the same time?
What gives me hope is their little sparks of activism. I have seen my daughter stand up to our school, our kitchen staff, because for nearly almost 3 years straight, they were serving on styrofoam and serving with plastic dinnerware, and she couldn't stand it. And she was posting on her Snapchat, and she was getting her fellow students kind of riled up and getting them active in going against that kind of thing. We have a beautiful school and a full service kitchen, and there was absolutely no reason for that. And she stood up to that, and she spoke up and said, this should not be happening. We have a green school. We can't have this, we can't have that. And so why are we serving on styrofoam? And so I see things like that, and that's what gives me hope. And every now and then, one of them will come running to me with something that they had just learned, and maybe I've known for a while and I've mentioned before, but when they have that final sort of that light bulb goes off, and they're like, wait, did you know this? And then they, and I'm like, yeah. So it's when they come to that realization on their own, that's a great feeling. So I think that's probably what really gives me hope, is that I agree that they're pretty aware, and they're not afraid to say something.
I love that. Stephanie, what are 3 or 4 things that you would recommend to all of us to help improve our the chances for our children's safe future?
Well, I think for one of the things that all of us really need to understand is I have a great passion for food sovereignty issues. And I feel like that's one of the ways that we can make a big change in even just how we are and how we live on this planet, which is the foods we choose to eat and where they come from and how they're grown. That's one thing. And so to teach them those kind of things, I think I'm going to kind of go a little bit more of the political direction, but I feel like the dilemma that, especially for us as Natives, face is really whether to participate in the governmental process that effectively erases our voices so much of the time. It's really difficult to kind of get invested into something that you know doesn't necessarily support you as either an individual, as a part of that group, or the group as a whole. As the first people on this continent, on this hemisphere, we're really rarely acknowledged, and that a lot of that is due to our population size, which obviously we know from our history why our numbers are so small. But that kind of makes us somewhat irrelevant politically as a group. But I think that it comes down to the individual has a voice, and so teaching our children that getting involved in the political process is important, and can therefore then speak for a whole group of people, and that means to vote. I think that it's really important for them to understand that whole process, and to know why we even bother with it. It kind of sounds funny to say that, but just for the fact that it's been so difficult for us as Native people, it's a bit of a conundrum. But for them to understand why that's important, I think is really essential.
Yeah. All right. Well, Shaina, what actions should all mothers and anybody really who takes seriously the role of caretaker, what actions should we take to improve our wider society for our children?
I think the number one is support. Number one is support our youth, support our communities that are doing the work in speaking up for a healthier community, for a just transition, speaking up at public hearings, at the air quality control commissioners, as well as the oil and gas commissioners, as well as the EPA, and your legislators and your governor, as well as your tribal government. We need to keep on that pressure on them, and don't give up in speaking up. And remember that in a community, mothers are always there, willing to support each other, and find that group that you can find that support.
Shaina, let me expand upon one thing. Thinking about what Stephanie said, that voting is important, but how do you convince people who have been historically disenfranchised and invisible that their voice counts? And I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
I think it's important to vote because there's more than the president to vote on, and we kind of get stuck on that. We're only voting on the president, and we don't see that there's more to the ballot than the president, and that local elections, as well as the initiatives that are being placed on the ballot for this election, have a lot of impact on local interaction and engagement.
Thanks, Shaina. Mary, give us your wisdom. Give us some actions.
Just handcuff me and I don't care. I've been like this. I swear to God, I came on the shoot saying this is the way life is going to be. I was in the middle of brothers. There was so many of us, but I had 4 brothers before me and 4 brothers after me. And so I came into this world with this mentality of a little bit of a masculine identity, in a sense that I could stand up for myself. And
I can imagine.
that kind of stayed with me, you know. I don't, you know, I don't think my husband in the beginning of my life really appreciated that, because I happened to challenge him on a lot of things, and I've always been to the point is my money is just as good as yours, and I've always had intentions that, you know, if we based a system over who made more money, I would be the one that would do it. I always was the high achiever. And having said that, was that my father had taught us, and my grandfather, and they said, in order for you to understand a world that is not of our own, you have to venture into it. And Creator will put pathways in front of you that are not very pleasing, but you have to experience it to understand the power that's inside of you. You have to understand the warrior in you. And the warrior is not to use it in a negative way. The warrior in you is you holding that light for hundreds and thousands of years so your people can see that you're still here.
Mm-hmm.
So having said that, you know, gosh, you know, I'm from the era of, you know, of the relocation acts, you name the acts that happened in this last century and this stuff, been there, done that, you know, all the way up into the 50s, 60s, 70s. And we've been in these movements for so long. And the movement that here is, which is very vital, needs to be exercised in an educational manner for the, not for the old people to understand, because, you know, they could have got it, they chose not to get it, so just let them walk on. We're here to invest in these children because they're the leaders of tomorrow. And when I say that is that, you know, how arrogant for myself to be, to create havoc, to set my loved one in. And so when we speak of this, we speak in the manner of, is that you have an obligation. You have an obligation with this breath. And within this breath of our ancestors that all entered this planet before us, and that will be the last breath if this planet ceases to be no more. Because we are the original gardeners. We are here, we are just. There's a reason why we are invisible. There is a reason why we have overcome such harshness and obstacles. Because we accept what the prophecies have been put before us, these imprints in us. We have, this today is probably the most modern day warriors possible. You know, like tomorrow, I'll go with the elders and the wisdom keepers to George Floyd's, into his memorial grounds, because being the first original people will say our prayers, because they respect that. And I will take my daughter and my granddaughter and my great granddaughter, you know, the Madé, the Top Hat Society there to pray. Not to be seen, not for photo ops, not for that, but because it was held in such a manner that when people call, I cannot breathe, and ask for their mother, it is every person's responsibility, because that essence of his spirit was put in this planet to shake and wake the world. And we cannot write off the skirt tails of saying this is what they did for me. We have to continue to walk and march forward as individuals within those four elements. Within the four elements. Mm-hmm. And we have to walk and carry the teachings of our grandfathers and our grandmothers, which within the Anishinaabe and the majority of our tribals are the 7 teachings. And if we being true to ourselves, you have to remember you are a mirror. And whoever surrounds you, if you don't like what you're seeing, that's what you're teaching them. because you reflect those behaviors. So if you go and you walk within goodness in that, there is the pity and the prayers we have to say for the ones that have not awoken yet to the realities of life. It is not for us to cut our tongue and speak with it in a split manner of saying one thing and doing another. And I know this may sound complicated to who's viewing this, but you have to remember, it isn't just the indigenous people, Anishinaabe people of this land. It's all people of this planet. Because 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 400 years, 10,000 years ago, our ancestors went through hell. So we could sit here and enjoy the electricity. We could enjoy the water that comes through there. But one of the things we can't get comfortable in, those elements were not meant to be prostituted. You should not have to pay for water. You should not have to pay for electricity, the light, and the fire, which is gas and this stuff. You should not have to pay and buy property of this earth. So understanding these messages, and if you can pass this forward of being obligated, we as individuals, as human beings, the two-leggeds, have to expand who we are beyond to the four-leggeds, to our relatives in the water, to the relatives in the sky, to the trees. Everything in this planet has a spirit, and those are our relatives. So within this context of what we have to talk about, you have to understand, I'm speaking of being a mirror. We believe that fear is a spirit as well. It's a fear spirit, and it's there to check you. Because if you're so scared, it's kind of like if you stole something and you were trying to hide it and people seeing you, you have that fear in you because you knew you did something wrong. So that's everything that is happening in this world, is this fear spirit is coming, not just randomly on its own. We brought it here. And we can also move it on. But we have to do it by living in our own truths. So like I said, I get rambling in the stuff in that there, and you probably asked me a question, but from my heart, for being a hollow bone in my spirit, on agreeing to do what we're doing today, is that the message that needs to go to all is that curing anger and hate, that is so much work. It's just working overtime for pennies. You get exhausted. It's time to turn it around to flourish within love, smiles, medicine. You can dance within your own truths or whatever it may be. But we cannot do it in a sick world. And we are very capable of turning it around, but we have to start with ourselves first. We cannot point our fingers at anybody else. We have to be the person that carries that light of goodwill and trust throughout this world. Yes, there's fracking and everything else that's going on. But what we have to do is teach in a mannerism for those little ones to see it in another way. They cannot see our anger, because if they see our anger, they're not going to see the light we're carrying. And they're going to get caught up in a system where their feet shouldn't even be planted.
Yeah, that last statement of yours really grabs me. They cannot see anger because then they cannot see the light.
Oh.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mary. To kind of come to the end of this, I would like to ask you each to go back to a time when you were a child, and maybe a very small child. And I would like to ask you to think about a woman, whoever she was, mother, biological or not, who comforted you when you were tired or upset or hurt or afraid. What did she do to make you feel better? And is there a song or a sound or a feeling or a smell or a sensation that you associate with being comforted in childhood? It can be a very simple answer, and I'll defer to our elder. Mary, would you like to talk about that and go back in your memories?
The first female was from the Removal Act. She said, you never, ever are going to be anything. You shouldn't even exist. I was filth. She reminded me of every contamination negative of who I was as being an Indigenous child. And I was so happy, even as I was feeling being hit by her, that I felt pity for her, because in that moment, I was so blessed to know when I took that first breath of air, or even before, while I was in my mother's womb, I was taught love. And she wasn't. And I don't know what had happened to her to be who she had to be, but I wasn't going to surrender to her. So I did quietly. And while I was being quiet, I was saying prayers and sending her love. Because if you feed to the negative, then you have lost.
You know, it makes me think like you were actually the mother at that moment.
Well, I guess I've never thought of that, but you know, it's, I remember leaving there, and I remember seeing her, and she looked shameful as I was leaving. And all I could do is wish her love, because the community I grew up in, I have never, ever had faced that. And I was so blessed on being who I am. I've never walked away from my culture.
How old were you?
Oh my gosh, I must have been about 5.
So
Came home.
So those values, that love, was given to you before that age, clearly.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and the thing is, yeah, my family always said they loved me. We love you. You know, we love this. I mean, love was it was like a breath. It was a breath in the morning, breath in the night. You know, the thing is, the appreciation and the gifts of who I was as a child was, you know, the thing is, I hope my great granddaughter talks about me the way I talk about my ancestors. Because then I did my job.
That's wonderful. Shaina, tell us, as you think back, where did that sense of comfort come from in a moment when you were tired, upset, hurt, or afraid? And what do you associate with that sense of comfort? Is it a feeling? Is it a sound? Is it a moment? Tell me about that.
You know what? When I think about it, my sister has always been a mother image of comforting me. She was always there when I was either hurt or upset, and she was always a great supporter in that way of comforting me when I was upset or sad. So my sister has always been there as a comforting mother who would always be there when I was sad or upset.
And how did she comfort you? Was it just keeping you company, or what kinds of things would she do for you?
I think as a child, she would just hold me and just hug me and give me that warmth of comfortness. So that warm hug that you get from your friends or family, that warm hug that you know so well. That's what comes to mind.
Stephanie, your turn. When you think back, think about that source, a woman maybe, who comforted you when you were tired or upset or hurt. And what do you associate with being comforted today as you think back to yourself as a child?
Well, I had a really difficult childhood. As I already mentioned, my biological mother and her sisters were not in my life. I was left with my mother's grandmother. And I'm not really sure what sort of caused the lack of affection, or any of those, love, when we talk about love. But the Meskwaki have been described as a very brutal people. And I don't know if maybe some of that is what came into my experience as a child. But there were no hugs, no kisses, no one said I love you. The only thing, there are two women that I can talk about that bring me any kind of comfort, and that would be my great grandmother, who I was left with, and she passed when I was just about to turn 4. I was maybe about a week or so before I turned 4 that she passed away. And one thing that I can remember about her was, although I was not picked up and held and coddled and, anything like that, I remember that the physical contact I did get was I would be crawling across the floor and looking for her. She was always sort of my mark of stability, at least in that sense. But she never pushed me off or anything like that. And so I would find her and I would crawl up to her and crawl onto her lap as she was getting ready in the morning. And she had long hair that she brushed and braided every day. And so I would sit on her lap and watch her brush her hair. And I remember just looking at her and feeling like she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And I have pictures of her, and that's what I feel. And I remember also being in the gardens with her, and she'd be hoeing down the row, and I would be sitting in the dirt playing when I was too young to help in the garden. And so at least there was some connection there with her. She never, as I said, she never pushed me away or anything like that, but it was just common that we didn't have a lot of affection and say I love you or anything like that. So my childhood was very different. But when I got to 4th grade and then on up into high school, I immediately made friends with someone who was Native Hawaiian, and his mom, and he called me sister right from the get-go, and his mom just accepted me as one of her kids. And so I have a Hanai mom. I'm really lucky for her. And I didn't tell her until years later, maybe about, I think it might be about 3 years ago now, that I finally told her why the label mom for me was so important. And that was because I was in high school and was not a good home situation. And another trauma had happened to me. And somehow or other, she just had a sense that I needed someone. And I feel like in her way, she gave me life, because I was planning to do something that was that would have ended my life. So, but she just showed up and said, let's go to dinner. And so I think that's where I feel like I've had the most mothering was from her. Lots of guidance, lots of love, and that night she actually gave me life. So
This has been an amazing gift to me, to be able to sit here and listen to you and learn and feel that in our different ways, motherhood connects us, and that we are here to work, to speak, to get that truth out, to be present, to do what we can, because like Mary, I believe it's in our power we have power, and it's our responsibility to bring that power forth. And what an amazing opportunity to do that as mothers of multiple definitions. I want to end this with something just very basic, musical, if possible, just because I'm a professional musician.
I could break it out. No. Well, before I do, one of the things within closing, even though this is Indigenous Peoples Day, is I need to say to everybody, get out there and vote. If you're Indigenous and if you're people of the original, of these lands, the original people, we have less than 100 years, since the Snyder's Act all the way up to now. Get out and vote, and let that be in the background here. I'm so proud of all our communities and stuff, is that they will come up with getting kids in this stuff to vote. Be creative with your t-shirts or whatever it is. And my granddaughter made the t-shirt that's sitting behind me of the 2020 Get Out and Vote. We are the seeds and we are still here, and it shows some of our ancestors all the way up to several of the ladies that are already in office. And I think, a lot of you may have the opportunity to meet them, Deb, that is sitting in Congress, and, there's just many of ours, right around to our relatives here, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, we do have a voice and it matters. So I want to say, get out there and vote. And once again, where it comes back to that is to think about, even sometimes, is for each one of you, is when times get really tough, can be really lonely, and when you really feel defeated in this stuff, sometimes you can just put your hand over your heart or in your stomach, because where we say our spirit rests in the center of our stomach, because if you get scared, it doesn't come from your head, it comes from the pit of your stomach. If you start feeling love, it doesn't come from your head, you get butterflies in your stomach. So we hold our heart, and you listen to those vibrations, and those vibrations of positive energy. And you can even do it by just a simple hum, all the way to the songs of the water that is today. And even if you just close your eyes and just went, and you actually feel the vibrations within your facial areas in there, and then you channel it to your heart, and then you channel it to your spirit and this stuff. And this is what we do as being water carriers and this stuff, as we teach now, is to stay within those elements, is we make it real soft when we sing the water songs, such as Nibe Gizagegu Gimi Gwetchaway Nimigu Gizaway Nimigu. And so when you sing those and you feel those, you can feel that vibration. And within those words, we're thanking the waters, which is very important. And our young relative, Doreen Day, her and her grandson composed that song. And that song travels all over the world. And it's sung like a lullaby, but it's for that vibrations to understand the importance of what our elements are to us, because without it, we wouldn't survive. So I want to say, Chimi Gwetch, I noticed the time as we just kind of got lost into it. I have to go. I got another Zoom. So I'm very honored to sit with you ladies here. And I want to say to the ladies here, thank you for sharing your stories, because I felt it. And you know, Stephanie, my spirit is hugging you. I'm sending you a cyber hug and this stuff.
Oh, thank you.
You know, and just remember the reflection of your ancestors and anybody at their weakest or lowest points. The awakening is when you start realizing you're never alone. They're in you. Mm-hmm. And so looking at your children these days and out there, and if you see them smile, that's all your ancestors smiling back at you. You know, they kept that light on for you. So I want to say, Chimi Gwetch, it was an honor sharing the space with you. And Karin, it's always a pleasure. You know me, I got your back, you know, regardless if we're marching in DC or wherever it may be, you know, or dodging the hate bullets, you know, we're there. And so let it be. So I want to say,
Mary, thank you. Stephanie, Shaina, it's just been absolutely lovely to share this time with you. Be safe and go forth.
Thank you all so much.